So we are going to look at notes 9-2, and we are still graphing, quadratics. The essential question here is, can I graph quadratics in the form of y equals ax squared plus bx plus c? And I know this looks like a lot. I need a question mark there. I want you to write down up until this point right here. So pause the video and just write down the review and then hit play again and we'll talk about it. So I'm going to talk about right now, it should all be written down for up to the review. We're going to go ahead and talk about the review, which should be a review. Number one, we just have y equals ax squared. We know how to graph this. We find the vertex, which we know is 0, 0, we make a table. And then we graph them. Example 2, we have the plus c, which again, we know our vertex is going to be the 0, comma, and your y value is whatever c is. Make a table and we graph it. So this is a review of 9-1, graphing quadratics. Now, I want you to get the rest of the paper written down. So pause the video and write everything else down just like you see it, and then hit the unmute button and we'll go through it. So now you're ready, you have everything written down, and I want to talk about them step by step. Now we have an A, we have a B, and we have a C. We have our equation in the form of y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. We can't make a table until we find our vertex. Okay? And this one gets a little bit more challenging. We have more steps. So step 1 is we are going to actually find our axis of symmetry. How do we do that? Well, remember it's a line. So it's an equation. It's going to be in the form of x equals, and it's negative b over 2a. That's how we find it. So we have to know what our b is, and we have to know what our a is out of our equation. That's all step 1. Find your AOS, axis of symmetry. Step 2 is our axis of symmetry, because it says x equals, that's actually your x value in your vertex. So step 2 is to find our vertex. And how do you find your y value? Well, we're going to substitute it in. Please know, I'm going to do 2 examples, so don't fret. Step 3 then is make the table. So we have to find our axis of symmetry first, then we have to find our vertex, then we have to make a table. We're going to jump into 2 examples, and I'm going to go through the step 1, step 2, and step 3. Here we go. So here is an equation, y equals x squared minus 6x plus 4. And with this example, we're going to go through each of those steps. So step 1 is going to be, let's find that axis of symmetry. Let's also identify what A, B, and C are. A is going to be positive 1. Ax squared plus bx. Let's change all of our subtraction to add a negative. So B is going to be negative 6. And C would be a 4. Okay, here we go. Step 1 we'll do in red. We're going to find our axis of symmetry. How do we find that? We're going to have to memorize it. It's x equals negative b over 2a. It's negative b. So we're just going to write the negative sign and then in parentheses write what b is. What is b out of our problem? It's negative 6. Divided by 2, and what is a in our problem? 1. So negative 6 is just going to be, I have to go below, sorry, I wrote a little big. Negative 6 is just going to go ahead and be a positive 6. divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. My x value is the whole number 3. My axis of symmetry is 3. We'll talk about where that goes on our graph. That's step 1. Step 2 will go in blue, and that's find our vertex. You know your x. You just found it. It is the 3. So you're probably thinking, well, Mrs. Bora, how do I find the y? Well, the y value is we're going to plug it in. We're going to take what x is, and we're going to plug it into our original equation. So let's write it out. We have y equals 1 in parentheses 3x squared plus negative 6, open parentheses, 3 plus 4. So everywhere that we saw the letter x, we put the number 3. Don't forget order of operations. We need to simplify. Let's do our exponents first. So 3 squared is 9, 1 times 9, plus negative 6 times 3, plus 4. Next part of our order of operations would be multiplication. We're going to have 9 plus negative 18 plus 4. And if we take 9 plus negative 18, we get a negative 9, plus 4, we get a negative 5. So our vertex, when we go to graph this, our vertex is going to be at 3, negative 5. So we have our axis of symmetry, we have our vertex, so we have our xy value now. Now we're going to make our table. Let's go to the green. XY. Remember, your vertex needs to be in the middle of the table. That is our vertex. And now it gets a little different because we're not dealing with zeros. Let's go 1 less than that 3, which would be the number 2. And what would be 1 bigger than 3? That would be the number 4. So we're going to take one of those values and we're going to plug it into our equation. Back to substituting. So y equals 1, and we are substituting the 2 in for all of the x's. A little more work when you have everything in the problem, when you have an ax squared plus bx plus c. So let's look at our math here. 2 squared would be 4. 4 times, so we have 4, and then we're going to times that by 1. Plus, and we still have our negative 6 times 2, and our plus 4. So 4 times 1 is 4, plus negative 12, plus 4. So 8 and negative 12 would be a negative 4. And what I'm going to remind you is that because we went 1 on both sides of our x value of our vertex, those answers are the same. Remember, it's going to be symmetrical. Let's go one more. So if I go to the number 1 and the number 5, our answers for this one are going to be the same. Little less work that way. So if I plug the number 1 in, negative 6 times 1 plus 4. So if we do our math here, 1 squared is 1 times 1 is 1. Plus negative 6 times 1 is negative 6 plus 4. So we actually get a negative 1. So now what do you have left to do? Graph it. Take these ordered pairs and plot them on the graph, and you will get a parabola. I don't think I need to stress graphing of how to plot those points. So I would like to spend time on looking at a second example. So how about we check our graphs in class? because there are more steps to these. Let's go ahead and look at our last example. We have to go through those steps. You have to have them written down. Let's go ahead and identify. We have y equals negative x squared plus 2x minus 5. We know we can put a 1 in for our a. It's going to be a negative 1 because of the negative symbol. We know we can change our takeaway 5 to add a negative. So it's really a is negative 1, b is 2, c is negative 5. Let's go ahead and start with our axis of symmetry, which is going to be, I'll write the formula down to find it. It's x equals negative b divided by 2a. So we take negative, and what did we get for b? We got 2 over 2 times an a is a negative 1. If we simplify that, we get a negative 2 divided by a negative 2. So my axis of symmetry for this one is just at a positive 1. So we have x equals 1. That is our axis of symmetry. It's going to cut through the x-axis at positive 1. We know that that is going to be part of our vertex. That is our x value of our vertex. Your AOS is the x value of your vertex. We need to find our y value. So we know where our vertex is located, where the point is located. In order to do that, we need to substitute the 1 in for the x value. So I have y equals negative 1. I'm going to plug 1 in for x and square it. Plus 2, plug in 1 in for x and square it. Plus negative 5. Order of operations. 1 squared, 1 times 1 is 1. So we have negative 1 times positive 1. Plus 2 times positive 1. Plus negative 5. I'm showing all my work here so you can see how I'm getting my answers. Next would be multiply. Negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. Plus 2. Plus negative 5. And so we would end up with negative 4. My y value will be a negative 4. That is our vertex. So it's going to be located at 1 comma negative 4. Step 3 is to make that table. And with our table, we like to put our vertex right in the middle, where we have the number 1, negative 4. This is our vertex. Now, in my table, I want to go 1 less than 1, which was going to be 0, and 1 greater than 1, which will be 2. And because we went the same distance away from our vertex with our x values, those answers will be the same if you substitute them in. So let's substitute the 0 in. It's a little easier math. Y equals negative 1, open parentheses, plug in 0 squared, plug in 0 for my other x, and plus negative 5. Let's think about it. 0 times negative 1 times, it's all 0. This is 0 plus 0, that's why I like zeros, plus negative 5. So what is 0 plus 0 plus negative 5? It is just negative 5. And so we need another point to get a good visual of this graph. So 1 more less than 0 would be a negative 1, and 1 greater than 2 would be a positive 3. They're the same distance from the vertex. So if I plug negative 1, so I have to keep these videos underneath 15 minutes, and I'm cutting it close. So I need for you to find this last point here. I got, I believe, my answer at negative 8. See if you agree with that. We'll check the graph in class. Thanks.